My fiancée got pregnant by my brother, and my mother was happy because she was going to be a grandmother, but 5 years later she calls crying to ask me for a favor, the old hag. 5 years ago, just a month before I turned 30, I discovered that my fiancée had been having an affair with my brother. The only reason they were even confessing to me was because she was pregnant and wanted to have the baby. My ex-fiancée, Karen, 30 years old, and my brother, Chris, 33, had apparently been sleeping together since Karen and I got engaged. Karen and I had been together since our senior year of high school and through college. So, getting engaged was obviously the next step, as we had been together for so long. However, after we got engaged, she decided to cheat on me with my brother. The only reason it even happened was that a few days after our engagement, my brother confessed to her that he had always had feelings for her, and he just felt he had to tell her because she was about to get married. And after that, he couldn't tell her anything about these things anymore. Then she suddenly realized that she was also gradually developing feelings for him. Apparently, they even flirted behind my back occasionally at family events and things like that, but she wasn't sure about him, which is why she stayed with me. I found out about all this 5 years ago, just a few months before my wedding, when the two of them sat me down with my parents and told me they planned to be together, and that Karen could no longer marry me because she was in love with Chris and they were expecting a child together. That day, I felt very disgusted and almost refused to believe it, and I told Karen that I wanted her to come home with me and end this relationship, whatever it was, with Chris. But my mother made it very clear that none of that was going to happen and that Chris and Karen were going to be together, and I just had to make peace with it because it was their decision. I couldn't even believe my mother was supporting something like this. At least my father had the decency to look ashamed and try to console me, but my mother was blatantly supporting this, and even told me that if I had any problem with it, I should keep it to myself because Karen was pregnant, and I had no right to bother her when she was in such a delicate condition. My mother was crazy about finally having a grandchild in the family, so she hardly cared what I was going through, and she even fought with me to try to justify what was happening. After the confrontation that day, Karen moved in with my family because her own parents no longer wanted to talk to her after she told them the truth. We obviously had to cancel the wedding, and my parents covered the cost, so I didn't have to worry about any of that. However, I was kicked out of the family because I refused to talk to them, and for the past 5 years we have had absolutely no contact. The only person who even bothered to try to reach out to me was my father, but I didn't even bother to talk to him, so there has been total silence from me after I cut ties with them. It took me a long time to get over what happened to me because Karen and I had been together for so long. I really loved her, so it took a lot of therapy to get over it, and even now I wouldn't say I've completely gotten over it, but I'm dealing with it. The rest of the family had kept in touch with me, however, and I found out from them that she had a child with my brother, and just a month after giving birth to their son, a paternity test confirmed that he was my brother's son and not mine. So, there was no need to contact me after that either, and they ended up getting married and have been together for the past 5 years. I had assumed that everything was going well for them, but about a week ago, my mother suddenly called me and took me by surprise because she was the one who most supported Karen and Chris, like on an unhealthy level. So, out of mere curiosity, I decided to call her back after she emailed me saying she urgently needed to talk to me. When I called her, she gave me some pretty bad news while crying, and I found out that my brother had been in a very serious accident. It was a hit-and-run case, and unfortunately, due to the impact, he had fallen into a coma, and there was no way of knowing how long it would take for him to recover. This had happened the previous week, and just 3 days later, the doctors said that things were pretty critical at that point. My mother decided to call me and inform me about it. At first, I thought she was going to ask me to visit and be there for the family, which I would have been willing to do because, despite everything, I think this is very important, and it would have been a reasonable enough expectation for me, and I don't want to turn my back on someone who is in such a terrible condition. But then my mother completely changed the subject and said she wanted me to be there for Karen and my nephew. I didn't even understand what that meant, and then she told me that now she expected me to take my brother's place with them. When I asked her to elaborate, she said that now that Chris was basically no longer there, I should be there for Karen and her child in every way. She wasn't just referring to financial support, but she really expected me to take over and live with them to take care of them. She said she would have taken them in at her house, but she wasn't getting any younger, and it would be too much work to take care of everyone, and that's why she was calling me to inform me. And she expected me to make a decision on the same call because time was of the essence. Obviously, I lost my patience because she hadn't spoken to me for 5 years, and now that she finally was talking to me, she expected me to do something so big. I could understand that Karen and her child were completely alone at this point and needed someone to be there for them, but that someone should have been someone from their immediate family and not me. Someone she had betrayed and hadn't even bothered to apologize to. So obviously, I immediately told my mother that I wasn't going to do anything like that, and that it was foolish to expect me to say yes to that. And then she started arguing with me on the phone, and I didn't have time to waste. I was already quite angry, and I didn't want to ruin my mood further while talking to her, so I just hung up and then blocked her once again. I tried to go about my day as usual after that, but I just couldn't stop thinking about what Chris and Karen were going through, and I really felt bad for them. But obviously, I wasn't going to do what my mother had asked and take my brother's place in his family because that was just weird. He was still around, but it wasn't like he had already passed away, and she was acting as if he was no longer there. I felt very unsure about this whole situation, so later that day I decided to call my father instead because I thought he would be more reasonable than my mother. It was very awkward to talk to him after 5 years of no contact, but after some small talk, I asked how Chris was doing, and he said things didn't look very good at the moment. And then I told him about the conversation I had with my mother earlier that day, expecting him to have a reasonable perspective, but instead he also said that my mother was right to expect that from me. That really shocked me because my dad used to be the more sensible of my parents, and now even he was saying such strange things. When I asked if he really meant that, he said yes, and that Karen and I had a history anyway, and that I was also part of the family, no matter what our relationship had been for the past 5 years. Ultimately, I am blood, and if they can count on someone to help the family, it should be me. My mother's expectations are not exactly unreasonable. That really took me by surprise. Right now, I honestly have no idea what to do. Over the past week, I have avoided talking to any family member, even other relatives, because I'm just afraid that someone will mention this to me and then I will be forced to explain my decisions. I also feel a bit like the bad guy here because I'm refusing to help my family and I know they really need me, at least emotionally, if not financially. I just honestly have no idea what to do, and I know what my mother is asking is really strange and unreasonable, but at the same time, I feel bad for outright rejecting it. I haven't even gone to the hospital to see my brother because I just feel very weird about this whole situation. I also haven't been able to talk to any of my friends about it because this is all so personal. They know how things have been between my family and me since the wedding was called off. But this is something a bit stranger than that, honestly. And that's why I'm now posting this here on the Edith, because I really think I need some objective opinions on what I should do, and both my friends and family are all going to have some sort of biased opinion. I really need advice because I think I'm going to lose my mind if I don't find an acceptable solution to all of this soon. Honestly, I feel like I'm going back to that phase of my life where I constantly thought about Karen and Chris right after discovering that she had been cheating on me, and that was a really dark time. And I don't want to go back there as it took me a lot to get out of that. So please, anyone who has something to say, no matter how harsh the opinion might be, just tell me so I can at least be distracted. So, am I the bad guy for refusing to go see my family and help them after my brother had an accident? Update 1. Hi guys. So I decided not to go see my family for now. It's really too much for me at the moment. I didn't even realize exactly how bad my anxiety had gotten in the last week, just from the things my parents were telling me. But now I'm back on my anxiety meds and trying to deal with everything. A lot of people have shown me love and support in the comments section of my original post, and even reached out to me personally in my DMs to let me know they're there for me and that I'm not alone, which I greatly appreciate. Thank you very much for that. I've also talked to a couple of my close friends and confided in them about what's happening because I really don't think I can deal with all this on my own. And they've also told me that I can talk to them whenever I need to vent. They've also told me that my decision not to go see them right now is the right one, because at this point it's the best decision I can make for myself, and I have to put myself first, no matter what's going on in other people's lives. So far, Chris and my family have always put themselves first, so I should do the same. To be honest, I don't think I really need to be there for them emotionally either. They have each other. They can deal with this on their own. I was the only one who had absolutely no one from my immediate family, who was there for me in the aftermath of the wedding being called off and finding out I'd been cheated on. My own parents turned against me and chose my brother over me, even though he was the one in the wrong and should have been the one to leave the family. But anyway, all that is in the past now, and I'm trying to move on. I won't be able to do that successfully if I go back to them again. So, I blocked them all once more, and I'm going to stick with my decision not to have any contact with them. I really regret what happened to my brother, and I really hope he recovers soon. because no matter what he did, I can't be the person who wishes something bad happens to anyone. So, I hope things work out for them, but I'm out of here. I'm just going to focus on my own mental health now, and I'm considering going back to therapy because of how I dealt with this, and the way the things my parents said affected me. I really think I need to talk to a professional because I don't think I'm handling all this as well as I thought, and all those old feelings are coming back to the surface once again. So, I'm just going to take care of myself now. Update 2. I heard from a couple of relatives that my brother's condition is still quite critical and shows no signs of improvement. It's been almost 2 weeks and he's still in the hospital. Things are really bad for the family and I feel sad for them, but there's not much I can do. Everyone who knows my family has stopped by the hospital to see my brother, at least once, in the past 2 weeks, and they've offered their condolences for the terrible accident that took place, except me. I would have, but I also found out from my relatives that my parents have been bad-mouthing me to anyone who has visited them, and they've been painting me as the villain. Apparently, they're telling everyone that they asked me to come visit and be there for the family, but that I refused, and they accused me of saying things like this was karma for having screwed me over 5 years ago, and that my brother deserved this for the record. Obviously, I didn't say anything like that. Some of them contacted me to confirm if it was true or not because it didn't seem like something I would say, as I'm generally kind to everyone. And when they asked me about it, I obviously told them that I didn't say those things and that my parents were making it up to make it look like I was a terrible person. Probably to get some reaction out of me or something like that, because that's how my parents are. I was really disappointed that they were saying such things about me and making up stories just to portray me as the bad guy, especially after having ruined my life once. I'm lucky that my relatives asked me about it, because if they had chosen to believe my parents, I don't think anyone in the family would be talking to me right now. For the past 5 years, I hadn't spoken to my parents, but the rest of my family, my uncles and aunts, and of course my cousins, had always been there for me. I really didn't want to lose that, and I guess my parents couldn't stand it, so they decided to try to ruin that for me too. I just don't understand why they hate me so much. I've literally never done anything to them. My brother and I have never been particularly close, and my parents have always had a special place for him since our childhood, but this seems unnecessary and excessive. Update 3. So, I posted an update 2 days ago, and today my mother decided to contact me again. I had blocked them everywhere, so she had no choice but to come see me to talk. When I got home from work, she was already there waiting for me. Honestly, I didn't even feel like talking to her because I was already exhausted from work. I almost decided to get back in the car, but then she saw me, and I had to go talk to her. I had no intention of letting her into my house because then it would be very difficult to get rid of her. So, I decided to talk to her in the front yard, which turned out to be pretty bad for me since she eventually started yelling at me, which also attracted the neighbor's attention. The conversation started normally. She made some small talk with me, and I had to respond politely. But then I couldn't help it, and I ended up asking her why she had been saying made-up things about me just to paint me as the bad guy. I told her it wasn't fair to me because I had never wished anything bad for my family, even after they had treated me like this, and I honestly just wanted to move on with my life. But they were even making that very difficult for me. I've been keeping these feelings to myself for a long time, so when I saw her, it just came out and I couldn't help it. In the end, I just told her that after everything that had happened, it was very hard for me to think of them as family because they had never treated me like family, and I was very disappointed by their behavior. So whatever she had come to talk to me about could be done later because I had just come home from work and I was really not in the mood to fight or talk about anything too emotionally draining. She had been listening to me calmly until that point, but when I told her I didn't want to talk to her at that moment, she got very angry and said she was only here to apologize for the very things I had mentioned. And she said she and my father had been thinking it over. They had been quite upset by my initial response because I had refused to step up for my family and even visit my brother while he was in the hospital. But then they realized they hadn't exactly treated me well in the last 5 years, and I was obviously still very upset about that even now, and that's why I wasn't visiting. She had come here to talk to me and try to work things out between us because she felt that right now, the family should stay united just for the sake of emotional stability. But after I told her I didn't want to talk to her at that moment, she changed her mind and decided she was going to yell at me instead. She told me that I should apparently be grateful that I still have a family because after the way I reacted when I found out about my brother's accident, she had planned to cut me off and make sure the rest of my relatives also stopped talking to me permanently. I didn't understand what she was talking about, so she explained that she apparently believed my reaction hadn't been sad enough when I found out about my brother's accident. I didn't even know what she expected me to do, and she said she had thought that when they told me about my brother's accident, she at least expected me to show some emotion, but I just sounded very indifferent on the phone call. Obviously, no matter what our personal relationships are, news like that was definitely going to affect me, and it really did, as I mentioned earlier. I don't wish this on anyone, and that includes my family, despite our personal relationships. So, I was definitely upset when I found out about his accident. Maybe that didn't come across on the phone call because she couldn't see my face, but her reasons were just completely unfounded and illogical. She even went on to say that the fact that I wasn't there for Karen and my nephew and didn't step up for them instead of family. She was just making things up again to justify how they were acting. And I really think my parents have started to lose their minds because these things are completely strange and unnecessary. Anyway, after she started yelling at me, I lost even more interest in talking to her, and I just decided to go into my house and ask her to leave. So, after a while, I unlocked my front door and went in while she was still yelling at me. She tried to follow me inside, but I shut the door in her face and told her to leave because I was seriously angry. I didn't want to interact with her anymore. She argued with me, but I told her I would call the police, and that's when she finally left, but not before cursing at me and saying I would face the consequences of this soon. I don't know what that means, nor am I interested in finding out what that means. I just want to relax and move on with my life. Update 4. Hi, it's been 26 days since the accident. My family finally had some good news to share with everyone today. Obviously, they didn't tell me personally. I found out through my cousins. But the good news is that my brother is finally showing some signs of improvement. He is no longer in a coma and is responding better, so that's a good sign. I really hope he can pull through and just get better from this point on because the last month has been really stressful for everyone as a family, even for me, even though I'm not even part of the family anymore and was cut off a long time ago. But the way my parents have been after me in the last 26 days has really shown me that they are unbalanced. And I think they were just taking it out on me after my last interaction with my mother, which I talked about in my last update. I didn't hear from her for a couple of days, but then my father called to scold me instead. He used a different number than he usually does, so I couldn't tell it was him when I answered the call. He started yelling at me almost immediately, so I didn't even have time to hang up when I realized it was him. He was also very cunning about it, trying to catch me off guard so he could yell at me. Instead of calling me at any normal time during the day, he decided to call me at 5 in the morning when he knew I would be asleep, and I would have to wake up to answer his call, and my brain would be all confused. So, a couple of days after my interaction with my mother, my father called me at 5 in the morning, and after almost 3 phone calls, I finally answered the 4th one. And he immediately started yelling at me about how ungrateful I was and how he wished I had never been born. He said he would make sure the rest of the family never spoke to me again because I was a terrible person for not even bothering to go see my brother in the hospital when he was suffering so much and for not being there for the family. After ranting for almost 5 minutes, he was the one who hung up because I was still trying to process everything that was happening. By the time I was done with that, he had already hung up the phone and blocked me. When it happened, it wasn't very fun, but now I find it pretty funny because my parents are so desperate to make me look like the bad guy and yell at me for arbitrary things that they are willing to go to such extremes just for these reasons. I've already said that I believe they were taking it out on me, just needing to escape from it, and as usual, I had to be there for the family. But that's okay because my father couldn't manage to turn the rest of the family against me because they know I'm not to blame, and they also know what happened 5 years ago. Anyway, now that my brother's condition is improving, I just hope they leave me alone and focus on him. Update 5. It's very strange to be back here after almost 3 years. So much has happened since then, and mostly for the better. I now live in Germany for work. I've been here for the last year and a half. I also started dating someone. My girlfriend and I have been together for the last 8 months, and it's been really good. In the last 3 years, I haven't had any contact with my family at all, and that has also been blissful, to be honest. I have kept in touch with my relatives, those who were kind to me, so that's different. My brother is completely fine now. He survived the accident, and although it took him a long time to get back to normal, he's fine now. Karen reached out to me after my brother started recovering to talk to me and apologize for everything that had happened in the past. I just told her that at this point, an apology simply wasn't necessary. She reached out to me after everyone found out I was moving to Germany for work and visited me to apologize, and it was on behalf of her and my brother. My brother couldn't come to see me because he was too embarrassed by the things that had happened 8 years ago, but honestly, none of that mattered anymore. So, I just told her that I forgave him. I didn't even care, and that part was true. I really didn't care because I was moving on with my life towards better things. Since then, I've been here, and my parents don't speak to me anymore, and I'm really happy about that because I wouldn't let that happen again under any circumstances. Finally, I am happy now. Anyway, now that everyone is up to date, I better get back to my life. Thank you so much to the people who showed me so much love and concern when I was posting here, and also kept asking about me in the comments and things like that, even after I stopped posting. Update 6. I'm only updating because some people wanted to know a bit more about me living in Germany. I was offered a job here, and I accepted because I needed a change of scenery. All of this definitely did me a lot of good, and as I said, I met someone, so it turned out to be a good decision for me. I also forgot to mention, but my brother found out that when he was in a coma, my parents offered me as a replacement, so the relationship between my brother and them is strained, to say the least. Karen told me that, who also said my brother isn't allowing them to see their grandchild at the moment. Even Karen said she had no idea what had happened with that offer, but, well, that was it.